My parents proudly handed my sister the keys to a brand new house, complete with a bow on the front door and tears of joy in her eyes. Then they turned to me with a smile that didn't reach their eyes and handed me a folder. Inside? Mortgage documents. You've put aside some savings, my dad said. It's time you start paying for things yourself. In that moment, it became painfully clear. One child was cherished, the other expected to carry the burden with a smile. I'm Cassandra Wilson, 32 years old, and until just 6 months ago, I honestly thought I had everything figured out. Good job as a software engineer, responsible savings, living well within my means. I've always been the responsible one compared to my younger sister, Allison, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for that family dinner when my parents slid mortgage papers across the table with this sickeningly sweet smile. You've saved enough, they said. It's time you help family. Their words still echo in my nightmares. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my parents, Julia and Donald Wilson, had this almost obsessive focus on money, at least for me. From the youngest age, I was taught the value of $1. My allowance came with budgeting spreadsheets when I was just 10 years old. Seriously. If I wanted new clothes or to go to the movies with friends, I had to save for it. Summer jobs started at 15, shelving books at the library, then scooping ice cream. My parents were proud, yes, but they were also relentless. Money doesn't grow on trees, Cassie, my dad would say, practically every week, while reviewing my savings account statements at the kitchen table. They pushed me to apply for every scholarship possible, and honestly, thanks to their pushing and my own grit, I covered about 70% of my University of Washington tuition. The rest? I worked 2 part-time jobs through college, mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the computer lab. I lived in the cheapest dorm, survived on ramen and campus food, and graduated with minimal student loans that I paid off within 3 years of working. My sister Allison's experience? Completely, utterly different. She's 3 years younger than me, but it felt like she lived in an alternate universe with the same parents. When Allison wanted new clothes, my mom took her shopping. School trip money? Dad wrote a check, no questions asked. Her allowance came with no strings, no budgeting lessons, just cash to spend however she wanted. Your sister is more sensitive than you, my mom would explain when I, baffled, pointed out the disparity. Not everyone can be as naturally responsible as you are, Cassie. Can you believe that? Like being responsible was some kind of innate superpower I was born with, not something I had to work for. After college, I moved to Seattle permanently, got a job at a growing tech company. I climbed the ladder over 10 years, becoming a senior software engineer with a really good salary. But even with the income growth, I kept a modest lifestyle. Rented a small 1-bedroom apartment, drove a reliable used Toyota I bought with cash, brought lunch to work most days. Meanwhile, Allison's financial chaos continued. She changed her college major 4 times, took 6 years to graduate, all fully funded by our parents. After that, she bounced between jobs, never staying more than 8 months. She'd quit because it was unfulfilling, or she disagreed with a manager or needed 3 months of traveling to find herself. And my parents? They supported her. They paid her rent when she came up short, covered her car payment when work was too stressful. They even paid off a $15,000 credit card debt she racked up on designer clothes and Las Vegas trips. Allison is still figuring things out, my dad would always say. Not everyone knows their path as clearly as you do. I loved my sister, I really did, but the double standard was infuriating. At family gatherings, I'd watch her, clueless about money. She'd show up in brand new, expensive outfits, talking about fancy brunches or concert tickets, all while working part-time at some boutique that barely covered her gas. Despite the blatant inequality, I kept building my own life. I worked, earned promotions, and slowly, carefully, built my savings. After years of meticulous planning, I finally hit my goal, enough for a down payment on a modest condo in Seattle. It wasn't fancy, but it would be mine, and the mortgage would actually be less than my rent. I was so excited, so proud of this achievement I'd worked so long for. When I got the dinner invitation to my parents' house that Sunday in April, I thought, maybe they want to celebrate. I'd mentioned my home buying plans briefly, and though they hadn't seemed thrilled, I hoped for a surprise show of support. Oh, how wrong I was. I arrived at their suburban Portland home exactly at 6. The familiar smell of my mom's lasagna filled the air, my childhood favorite. The table was set with the good china, the kind only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and a bottle of wine was already open. "Cassie, right on time as always," my mom, Julia, said, hugging me tight. She looked different. A new blouse, her hair freshly colored. My dad, Donald, came in from the living room, checking his watch before giving me a quick hug. "Traffic wasn't bad?" he asked, pouring me wine without waiting for an answer. "No, the drive from Seattle was smooth," I replied, and that's when I saw it, a quick, loaded glance exchanged between them. Something felt off. Where was Allison? The table was set for 3. "Oh, she couldn't make it," my mom said, a little too quickly. "She's in San Diego with friends. A last-minute trip. You know how spontaneous your sister is." The alarm bells started ringing. We sat down, and they kept the conversation light at first. My job, Seattle weather, the book I was reading. But they were distracted. My dad kept checking his watch, my mom refilling my wine glass before it was even half empty. After the main course, instead of dessert, my mom cleared the plates and returned to her seat. My dad cleared his throat, straightened his posture, and folded his hands on the table. "Cassie, we have some exciting news," he began, his voice strangely formal. "We've helped Allison buy a house." I was genuinely surprised. "Oh," I said. "That's big news. I didn't realize Allison was looking to buy, or that she'd saved up for a down payment." My mom laughed, a little too brightly. "Well, you know your sister. When she falls in love with something, she goes for it. She found this absolutely perfect place in the West Hills neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a gorgeous view, walking distance to all those cute shops." I nearly choked on my wine. West Hills? That's one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. "That sounds expensive," I managed to say. "It is an investment in her future," my dad stated firmly. "The housing market is only going up, and it's a good neighborhood. The schools are excellent." "Schools?" I asked. Was Allison planning kids soon? Was she even seriously dating anyone? The last I heard, she was still enjoying the single life, no plans for settling down. My parents exchanged another look, and my mom reached for a folder that had been sitting on the sideboard. She slid it across the table toward me. My dad continued, his voice softer now. "The thing is, Cassie, we took out the mortgage in our names. Since Allison's credit isn't, well, you know how it is. But we've realized that with retirement coming up in a few years, we can't really afford the payments." I stared at them, not touching the folder. "So you're selling the house? Or Allison is going to make the payments?" My mom pushed the folder closer. "We need you to take over the payments, sweetheart." The room seemed to tilt. My blood ran cold. I opened the folder. Mortgage papers for an $800,000 home with a $750,000 mortgage. The monthly payment was over $4,000. This had to be a joke, right? I looked up at their serious faces. "You can't be serious. You want me to pay for Allison's house? A house that costs nearly $1 million? You have a good job, Cassie," my father said, his tone hardening. "You've always been good with money. You have more than enough saved up." More than enough? I'd been saving for years to buy my own place. A modest condo I could actually afford, not some mansion in West Hills. "Family helps family," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. "Allison needs stability to get her life together. You know how she struggles." "Where is Allison, really?" I demanded. "Does she even know you're asking me this?" "She's really in San Diego," my father said. "And yes, she knows we're talking to you about helping with the house." So she's on vacation while you asked me to pay for her luxury home? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why isn't she here for this conversation? She was nervous about how you'd react, my mother admitted. She knows you've always been judgmental about her choices. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this gut punch. My parents had bought my irresponsible sister a house they couldn't afford and now expected me to foot the bill because I had been responsible with my money. No, I said finally, my voice firm despite the tremor inside me. Absolutely not. I will not pay for Allison's house. Cassandra Marie Wilson, my father said, using my full name like I was a child in deep trouble. You have more money than you need. Your sister deserves a nice place to live just like you do. I've worked for every dollar I have. I shot back. I've saved and sacrificed for years. Allison has never held a job for more than 8 months. She's never saved a dime in her life. That's not fair, my mother protested. Your sister has different strengths. Not everyone is good with money like you are. Being good with money isn't some innate talent, Mom, I retorted. It's about making responsible choices day after day, year after year, something you've never expected Allison to do. The conversation devolved from there. My father's voice grew louder, lecturing me about family obligation. My mother started crying, saying I'd always been jealous of this special bond she shared with Allison. They brought up every tiny favor they'd ever done for me, conveniently forgetting the years of self-sufficiency I'd maintained while they bankrolled my sister's every whim. If you don't help your sister, my father finally threatened, his face red. You're not the daughter we raised you to be. I stood up from the table, shaking with anger and disbelief. Maybe I'm not, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe I'm better than that. I left without dessert, the mortgage papers still sitting untouched on the table. The air tasted of betrayal. For 3 days after that disastrous dinner, I ignored every call and text from my parents. There were dozens, each one more guilt-laden than the last. Your sister is heartbroken. We raised you to care about family, after all we've done for you. I threw myself into work, desperate to process what had just happened. Had my parents always seen me as nothing more than a financial resource for my sister? Had they been planning this all along, encouraging my responsible habits just so they could eventually tap into my savings? On the 4th day, there was a knock at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Allison, her eyes puffy like she'd been crying. Against my better judgment, I let her in. Cassie, please! She started the moment the door closed. You have to help me. I love this house so much, and I had no idea Mom and Dad were going to ask you to pay for all of it. I thought they were just going to ask you to help a little bit. She looked around my small apartment with barely disguised disdain. It's not like you're using your money for much anyway. You live like you're still in college. I live within my means, I corrected her, my voice tight. And I've been saving to buy my own place. But you could still help me and do that, Allison insisted. You make so much money at your fancy tech job. Something in her phrasing clicked. Wait a minute. You said you had no idea they were going to ask me to pay for all of it. So you didn't know they were going to ask me for money? Allison's face flushed a deep red. Well, I mean, we talked about it a little. You were in on this from the beginning, I realized aloud. You knew they were going to ask me to pay for your house. Not the whole mortgage, Allison protested, her voice rising. Just, help out until I get on my feet. Find a better job. You've been getting on your feet for 10 years, Allison. I shot back, the anger bubbling over. When are you actually going to stand on them? Our argument escalated until Allison stormed out, slamming my door hard enough that my neighbor poked his head out to check if everything was okay. That evening, I finally answered my parents' call, absolutely determined to set the record straight. Cassandra, my father began formally. We need to discuss the situation with your sister's house. There is no situation, I replied, my voice stone cold. I'm not paying for Allison's mortgage. End of discussion. We've already put down a substantial down payment. My mother chimed in, her voice tremulous. We took it from our retirement fund because we believed you would help with the monthly payments. The air left my lungs. So, you made a massive financial decision based on money I never offered or agreed to give? That's not my responsibility to fix. We're family, my father insisted. Family takes care of each other. Funny how that principle only applies when Allison needs something, or when you need something for Allison, I pointed out. It never applied when I was working 2 jobs in college, or eating ramen 5 nights a week to pay off my student loans. The conversation devolved into accusations and guilt-tripping. My parents' tone grew increasingly hostile as they realized I wasn't going to cave to their demands. You'll regret this selfishness, my father finally threatened before hanging up. I just sat there, phone in hand, utterly numb. A week later, I received a call from my Aunt Eleanor, my mother's sister from Eugene. Cassie, honey, what's this I hear about you refusing to help your sister? She asked without preamble. I explained the whole gut-wrenching situation, bracing myself for another lecture about family obligation. Those fools! Aunt Eleanor sighed instead. I told Julia this was a terrible idea. Did you know they emptied their retirement accounts for Allison's down payment? Nearly $300,000 gone. The revelation stunned me. My parents were in their early 60s. They had just decimated their retirement savings for Allison's house, and now they expected me to take on an additional financial burden to fix their poor decision. Over the next few weeks, the family divide grew into a chasm. Relatives took sides, most supporting my parents and Allison. I received passive-aggressive emails from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My grandmother called to tell me she was disappointed in my selfish attitude. Only Aunt Eleanor and my Uncle Philip stood by me, understanding the completely unreasonable position my parents had put me in. Concerned about the escalating situation, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor, Gabriela Martinez. She listened to my story with increasing alarm. You need to protect yourself legally, Gabriela advised. Given how determined your parents seem, I wouldn't be surprised if they try something else to get your money. I thought she was being paranoid. Until 3 days later, when a certified letter arrived at my apartment. My hands shook as I opened it to find legal papers. My parents were suing me for $500,000. Their claim? That I had verbally agreed years ago to help with family expenses in return for their investment in my education and future. They were claiming my entire financial success was contingent on their support, and therefore I owed them recompense now that they needed it. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But there it was, in black and white, with a court date set for just 6 weeks away. The panic attack hit me the moment I finished reading the lawsuit papers. My chest tightened, my vision blurred at the edges, and I couldn't catch my breath. I slid down against my apartment wall, the papers clutched in my shaking hand, gasping for air, fighting waves of dizziness. When I could finally breathe again, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and spent the day researching attorneys. By afternoon, I had an emergency appointment with Lawrence Thompson, a family law specialist with experience in financial disputes. Lawrence's office was small but professional, law books lining the walls, framed diplomas behind his desk. He was an older man, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. He reviewed the lawsuit documents while I sat there, nerves shredded. This is... he began, then paused, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. This is quite frankly one of the more absurd lawsuits I've seen in my 30 years of practice. But absurd doesn't mean harmless. Even frivolous lawsuits can be dangerous if not properly defended. So, they can't really win, right? I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. It's highly unlikely. Their claim that you verbally agreed to financial support is difficult to prove without documentation. However, he cautioned, family court can sometimes be unpredictable, especially when emotional appeals are involved. We need to build a strong defense. Over the next few days, a disturbing discovery came to light. My parents had falsified documents claiming I had promised financial support. They had created backdated emails and letters in which I supposedly acknowledged a debt to them for raising me and putting me through college. These are completely fake, I told Lawrence, staring in disbelief at the documents he'd received through Discovery. I never wrote any of these. I suspected as much, Lawrence replied grimly. The good news is that forgery will completely undermine their case. The bad news is that your parents have just committed fraud, which could have serious consequences for them. The realization that my own parents would go so far as to commit forgery to take my money left me numb. What had happened to the people who raised me? Who taught me right from wrong? Were they always capable of this? Or had their devotion to Allison corrupted them so completely? I threw myself into preparing our defense. I gathered bank statements showing I had supported myself financially since college. I found old emails thanking my parents for birthday gifts, but clearly indicating all financial support had ended after high school. I even located my college financial aid records, showing my education had been funded primarily through scholarships and my own work, not parental support. The process took a massive toll on me. I developed insomnia, lying awake at night, replaying my childhood, questioning every memory through this new, horrifying lens of betrayal. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. At work, I started making careless mistakes that weren't like me, drawing concerned looks from my manager. My coworker, Heather, noticed my deterioration and invited me to lunch. Over sandwiches I mostly picked at, I confided in her about the lawsuit. My parents did something similar, Heather revealed, surprising me. Not a lawsuit, but they emptied my college fund to pay for my brother's gambling debts. I know how it feels to be the responsible one who gets punished for it. Her understanding was a lifeline in a sea of judgment. Most people I told about this situation immediately asked what I might have done to cause such a rift, as if parents suing their child must be the child's fault. A week before the court date, I ran into Allison at a coffee shop near my apartment. I hadn't even known she was in Seattle. She was wearing expensive new boots and carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Are you happy now? She demanded, loudly enough that other customers turned to look. You're tearing our family apart with your selfishness. I'm selfish? I kept my voice low, despite the fire raging inside. You're living in a house our parents can't afford while they sue me for money I earned. How exactly am I the selfish one here? They've given up everything for me, and you won't help at all. Allison shot back. Do you know Dad's talking about coming out of retirement to pay the mortgage? Then sell it, I suggested, a cold, hard truth. Get a place you can actually afford. I'm not selling my dream home just because you're being stingy, she snapped. I deserve that house. I deserve nice things too, Cassie. Deserving has nothing to do with it, I countered. It's about what you can afford. I can afford it if you help, she insisted, as if this logic made perfect sense. I left the coffee shop shaking with anger, but that encounter gave me one important piece of information. Allison had already moved into the house. Despite the uncertain mortgage situation, she was counting on winning the lawsuit or simply wearing me down. The day of the first court appearance arrived. I dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, my hair pulled back, professional but not flashy, just like Lawrence advised. Walking into that courtroom and seeing my parents sitting at the opposite table was surreal. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, but my father stared at me coldly. They looked like strangers. Not the people who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, bandaged my scraped knees. Judge Catherine Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who studied both parties with a critical eye. Let me understand this correctly, she said, reviewing the documents. The plaintiffs, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, are suing their daughter for $500,000 based on an alleged verbal agreement made when she was, how old? 18, Your Honor. When she left for college. My parents' attorney, Benjamin Russell, answered smoothly. And this agreement was never put in writing? It was a family matter, Your Honor. A matter of trust between parents and child. Judge Martinez's eyebrow rose slightly. I see. And the defendants have submitted evidence that these supposedly supporting emails are forgeries? We dispute that characterization, Benjamin replied. There may be some confusion about dates and content. Confusion, the judge repeated dryly. About who wrote the emails and when? Interesting choice of words, counselor. The first day made it clear this wouldn't be simple. Their attorney painted me as this ungrateful daughter who'd benefited from their sacrifices, only to abandon them. Lawrence methodically presented evidence of my financial independence and, crucially, the falsified documents. By the end of the day, Judge Martinez seemed increasingly troubled. Before adjourning, she looked directly at my parents. I have one question I'd like the plaintiffs to consider before we continue tomorrow, she said. Did you ever consider your daughter might have her own financial goals? My father answered without hesitation, his voice ringing through the quiet courtroom. She has more than she needs. Allison needs it more. The judge made a note. Her expression unreadable. My heart sank, a mix of sadness and bitter confirmation. The courtroom felt colder on the second day. I sat rigidly beside Lawrence, avoiding looking at my parents. Their attorney, Benjamin, arranged his papers with a confidence that worried me. Judge Martinez entered impassive. We'll continue with testimony today. Plaintiff's counsel. Call your first witness. Benjamin called my father first. Donald Wilson took the oath, looking distinguished. He spoke clearly, confidently, about how they had invested everything in my future. We made sacrifices so Cassandra could succeed, he testified. We drove an old car so she could have the best educational opportunities. We took her to museums and science camps. We paid for advanced math tutoring. Benjamin spun this narrative, making it sound like my entire childhood was an expensive training program for my future earning potential. And was there an understanding about how this investment would be repaid? Benjamin asked. Absolutely, my father answered without hesitation. Cassandra agreed that once she was established in her career, she would help support the family financially. She specifically promised to help her sister if needed. It was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such conviction, I actually saw a juror nodding along. When Lawrence cross-examined my father, he started gently. Mr. Wilson, did you pay for your daughter's college tuition? We contributed. My father hedged. Lawrence presented my scholarship letters and financial aid documents. These records show that 90% of Cassandra's education was funded through scholarships and her own work-study jobs. Your contribution amounted to approximately $5,000 over 4 years. Is that correct? My father shifted uncomfortably. The dollar amount doesn't reflect the emotional support we provided. I'm asking about financial contributions, sir. $5,000 total. Yes or no? Approximately. Yes, my father admitted, reluctantly. Lawrence then presented my bank records showing my financial independence since graduation, my student loans that I paid off, and documentation of my modest lifestyle. Would you characterize your daughter as financially irresponsible, Mr. Wilson? Lawrence asked. No, my father conceded. Cassie has always been good with money. Yet you believe she owes you $500,000 because family takes care of family, my father insisted, his voice rising. She has the means to help her sister, and she refuses out of spite. My mother testified next, her testimony more emotional than factual. She cried, talking about her worries for Allison's future and how hurt she was by my abandonment. She spoke about Allison's sensitive nature and creative spirit that made practical matters like steady employment difficult for her. Allison needs stability to flourish, she insisted. This house is her chance to finally find her footing. Under cross-examination, Lawrence was respectful but persistent. Mrs. Wilson, how many times has Allison held a job for more than 1 year? My mother hesitated. She's had challenges with employment. So the answer is never correct? Not once in the 12 years since she graduated high school. Different people have different paths, my mother replied defensively. Indeed, they do, Lawrence agreed. And would you say you've supported Allison financially throughout her adult life? We've helped her when needed. According to these bank records, Lawrence said, presenting exhibits, you and your husband have provided Allison with approximately $375,000 in direct financial support since she turned 18. Is that accurate? A murmur went through the courtroom. My mother looked down at her hands. That sounds about right. And during that same period, how much financial support did you provide to Cassandra? Cassie didn't need our help, my mother replied, as if this were a failing on my part. So, the answer is 0. Correct? Yes, she admitted quietly. When it was my turn to testify, I was nervous but absolutely determined to speak my truth. I explained how I had worked my way through college, built my career through consistent effort, and saved carefully for years toward my goal of home ownership. Did you ever promise your parents repayment for raising you? Lawrence asked. No, I said firmly. I've always been grateful for the opportunities they provided, but there was never any agreement that I would financially support them or my sister in adulthood. What about these emails they presented as evidence? Lawrence handed me the printouts of the forgeries. I examined them carefully. These are fake. I never wrote these. You can see the inconsistencies in how my name is spelled in the signature block, and the email address shown here wasn't even my email address during the dates. Claimed. Benjamin's cross-examination was aggressive, designed to provoke an emotional response. Isn't it true that you've always resented your sister? He demanded. No, I replied calmly. I love Allison, but I don't believe enabling her financial irresponsibility is good for her or for our family. So, you admit you're judging your sister's lifestyle choices? I'm making observations based on a pattern of behavior over many years. I corrected him. Benjamin switched tactics. Your parents gave you life, raised you, clothed you, fed you. Do you believe you owe them nothing in return? I believe I owe them respect, love, and gratitude, I replied. I don't believe I owe them $500,000 to buy my sister a luxury home she can't afford. The most revealing moment came when Benjamin called a surprise witness, Allison herself. She entered the courtroom wearing a conservative dress, her usual flashy style subdued. She tearfully testified about how much the house meant to her and how my refusal to help was destroying our family. I just want a chance to start over, she said, dabbing at her eyes. A stable home would give me that chance. During cross-examination, Lawrence was gentle but direct. Miss Wilson, are you currently employed? I'm between jobs at the moment, Allison admitted. How many job applications have you submitted in the past month? I'm taking some time to figure out my next career move. She hedged. So, none? Lawrence clarified. Not yet, she conceded, reluctantly. And this house in West Hills, how much is the mortgage payment? I'm not sure exactly, Allison said, looking uncomfortable. My parents handle that. It's $4,300 per month. Lawrence informed her clearly. Without steady employment, how did you plan to make these payments? Cassie was supposed to help until I got established, Allison replied, as if this had been a known agreement. Did you and your sister ever discuss this arrangement directly? No, but my parents said they would take care of it. One final question, Lawrence said, his voice quiet. If you had to choose between keeping this specific house and healing the rift with your sister, which would you choose? Allison hesitated, looking trapped. That's not a fair question. I shouldn't have to choose. Nevertheless, it's the question before you. Lawrence pressed. I deserve that house, Allison finally said, her voice hardening. Cassie can afford to help me keep it if she wasn't so selfish. A strange, cold sense of clarity washed over me at her words. The sister